This presentation is basically targeted around what operators will need to do to comply with the June 2 deadline. Essentially, we've been building up to this with a number of other presentations, but since it's not that far away, if you haven't finished off on what you need to do, or if you need some advice on what you have to do, now's the time to find out or ask for it. I'll cover the topics shortly, and I will go through a bit of an agenda here. So I've just given you the welcome. What we're here for, well, it's for you. We're here to answer whatever questions you might come up with, and I'll cover those topics shortly. How this session will run, we'll run through some general content. We don't really have a lot of material on PowerPoint, so it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. But basically, the material that we're going to cover is designed to prompt you to ask a question should you have one. Because we've got a reasonably large group, I anticipate that many of the questions will be common to other people in the group, and therefore our answers will apply mostly to them as well, which is why we like to get everyone together. When a question pops into your mind, pop it into the chat. Sometimes I might miss that, or the person who's presenting might miss it. So the MC will capture that, and when the time comes, read it back to us. Now, with questions, inevitably, we will be able to answer some of them immediately. And in the background in CASA are some SMEs in various areas other than mine who will be able to answer questions which are not in my ambit, and they will answer it where possible. If the question is too complex or of a topic that we can't answer immediately, as Melissa said, we'll be recording the questions. Someone will take a note of that question and who asked it. We will find the answer to that where possible, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. While we're doing the Q&A, if you feel the need to launch into a short verbal question, go to the reactions tab, put your hand up. If the presenter sees it, they'll invite you to speak, and open your mic up and give us the question, and we'll endeavour to try and answer it. Now, we've allowed an hour here. The open Q&A will cover after each topic. So we will probably at some stage, prompted by the MC, just say, look, we have to move on to the next topic so that we can fulfill most people's needs. But that doesn't mean you can't continue to ask a question online, and we'll get back to you when we can. Now, as I said, there's a number of topics here. We've got experts to answer your questions. They'll either be, well, we say lurking. They're not lurking, they're listening to what you have to say, and they will pipe up if they're the SME. I may very well ask them to do that, or whoever's answering may just pause and wait for them to jump in. So the topics we've decided to talk to you about today are using the sample exposition operations manuals. They've been out for a little while now. It's likely that a few people have read those and may very well have questions about that, and I will be able to talk to that area. The manual authoring and assessment tool is a common theme, and we have the manual and assessment tool expert online to talk about that and to answer questions on that matter. General understanding of the rules, and that's just going to be some generic things about how you get guidance and how you best access our materials. We're going to talk about continuing airworthiness and maintenance and the impact of the new rules has on those topics, and we have an expert to talk about that. And we're just going to have a little bit of a session on what happens after you submit your manuals or expositions, and what CASA does when we get those things. So I'm going to launch straight in on the first presenter, and we're going to talk about the expositions and operations manuals that are expected to be provided by the 2nd of June. So just a quick refreshment of the timeline. I'll just flash those up there. So that's all gone. 5th of October, 1st of December interim manuals, 2nd of December the CASAs are in force, And 2nd of June 2022 is the next deadline coming at a lot of you, which where CASA requires you to submit an integrated and updated exposition or operations manual. I'll bear in mind one thing I just forgot to mention. This all the materials we've been producing today, to date, have been designed to accommodate people who have taken advantage of the various exemptions. In other words, our samples and all those sorts of things don't include information on topics like training and checking, HFNTS and SMS, because we took the view that people would defer them where possible. However, don't despair. We are preparing material, guidance material and samples in those spaces, and you will have them in good time for the deadlines when they come. Now, we're doing that so that we just don't bombard everyone with every piece of guidance they may not need just yet. So hence the staggering of that output. Sample manuals, we call them sample manuals, they're really sample expositions or manuals. We targeted those around a small transition charter airwork operator, and we felt that they were the people who were most likely to use that material. And the typical operator would have piston twins and singles, single pilot air transport, and a combination of areas of operation, either rotary wing air transport and 138 or fixed wing air transport and 138. So those samples, when you get in there and look at them, you'll find that they're a combined set of documents. And the idea is that operators will use only the ones that are applicable to them and take out the rest. Like I said before, the samples have been designed to the operators would take advantage of the deferrals of SMS, TNC and HFNTS training. And there are placeholders in the samples to enable that material to be inserted later on without upsetting the order of how things run. All our sample materials, our expositions and operations manuals are a starting point. They're designed for a smaller operator, but they can work for a larger, more complex operator. You're free to amend them as much as you like. You can use bits of them. You don't have to use any of it. You can plagiarize it. It's all free for you to use. And those things that we are producing are only a suggestion of how an operator in this particular regime could construct an exposition or an operations manual. There's no requirement for you to use anything that we produce, and you can certainly have your own method if you wish. There was a question, but I missed it. Can I have that question again? For some reason, I'm not seeing it. Here we go. Can you read that question out to me, please, Melissa?
Yeah, sure. So Scott is asking, is there a timeline as to when the additional samples for SMS training and checking for operators who wish to or need to have them integrated early?
Okay, that sounds like a bit of a two-part question. Each exemption has its own, if you read the exemption instruments, you'll see in there there's a paragraph that says preparation for the exemption to end. And for each particular one, there is a quick 3 or 4 dot points on what you've got to do for that particular exemption and when you need to do it. So, for instance, training and checking is due for 135 operators who deferred it in December 2022. There's no problem with adopting early. Anyone can adopt early. And however, there are some limitations about how we can go about accepting that. Niels, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Niels Bunt. I'm branch manager, operational implementation branch, responsible for implementing the deferred provisions. Yes, there is a plan to make sure that industry has the right artifacts, as we call it, available to them. So we aim to have at least 3-month gap between when submissions need to be made and those artifacts being available to industry. Now, we aim to try to get that done and published much earlier. For example, training and checking systems is quite a bit already on the CASA website, but we'll have a plan to get communication out to industry to make sure everybody's aware of what is coming in time.
Thanks, Niels. Does that answer your question? I presume it has, since I haven't seen anything. If you've got anything further, please put it in the chat and we'll catch it later on. Now, moving on sample manuals and expositions. So there's a couple of methods that you could use these. So when you look on our website, there are two versions. There's the template for parts 133, 135 and 138. This is a combined sample, and accompanying that on our website is a how to use that guide. It's called the guide to the sample, quite obviously. And so that's for the generic sort of operator who operates in multiple areas prior to transition and is continuing to operate in multiple areas. There's also a template for just mustering under Part 138. So this was designed specifically for helicopter mustering. It's a fairly simplistic sample manual just for that segment of operations, and it's got its own how-to guide, but it could also be used for any other 138 operation that you choose to add to it just by customizing that sample. The next thing is the two ways to access that material. So when you go on the website, you'll see the Word versions of that. You can download those. As I said before, you can do anything you like with them. You can use them as they are. You can add pieces into them. You can use segments of it. You can embed your own material into there if you wish and reorder it however you like. It's merely there for a prompt to get you started, or if it meets your requirements, you could use it very close to what it is if you fit into the scope that we've designed it for. The other way to access the samples is to use our free manual authoring and assessment tool, and we'll have someone to talk about that after I finish this particular section. So what I'm going to do now is call for questions on this topic. So has anyone got anything further on sample expositions, sample manuals? If you can just leave Matt alone for a second, and I will introduce Alison shortly to talk about that. So do we have any takers for anything on the samples at the moment? Okay, good. Yep, some of us already required to have some guidance would be helpful. Okay. I'll deal with the first one first. The samples were designed for operators who were transitioning and did not have SMS and training and checking before. Obviously, those who've transitioned may have elected to continue to use those systems, and we certainly would encourage them to do that. So the samples really are not designed to cover that part of the industry. That's the simple answer to that one. What is happening after Chris guessed, I'll get to that one in a second. So we're designing the samples around the people who are likely to have most use for them. And leading on to the next question, no, we're not intending to produce a sample for Part 121 operators at this stage. There was another question in the middle there that I didn't quite capture. Can you give that back to me, Melissa, the one I didn't answer?
So Charles is asking, can you please expand on what is meant by an integrated ops manual?
Okay. I suppose it's not my area. However, I will attempt to explain that. Prior to 2nd of December, CASA required you to submit operations manuals with amendments to cover the new regulations. We were giving operators 6 months to get their manuals integrated by, in other words, incorporating all of those new things into a cohesive manual that didn't have little separate editions, post-it notes, I don't know, however you do it, bits of paper inserted, and an ad hoc type of amendment system. So that's what we mean by an integrated manual, the sort of thing that you would expect to have in a mature organisation, and that's the concept there.
Excuse me, Greg.
Got a hand up here?
Yeah, yep. Pete Marsh has got his hand up. I'm not
sure
if he's got
Go
something
ahead,
he wants to add on that.
Go ahead, Pete.
G'day all, it's Pete Marsh from the Ops Implementation Branch. Just to back up what Greg's saying there, to be 100% clear, when we use the term Integrated Operations Manual, it does not mean it has to be one particular document. An exposition, for instance, might be multiple documents that form that expositions, and it could be multiple volumes of documents, or you may have one exposition document or operations manual that is all incorporated into the one volume. It's up to you how you set it up. But in terms of integrated, we need all the bits and pieces of the puzzle in your submission. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Peter. Now I'm seeing Scott's question here. Amended check and training AC to suited smaller aircraft operations. It's currently under development, and it's getting some internal feedback on what the content is. That's due fairly soon, and you'll have it in good time to develop material for it. We're going to be producing a sample section for training and checking for 133, 135 operators as well. And that will go into the sample manual and MAT suite when finalised. So there will be some material there that will be fairly fit for purpose almost straight away for you, for operators who fit this regime. Any more on samples? Okay, well, look, moving on, I'd like to then move to the next topic in the list, which is Matt. Oh, for some reason, it's not animating. Never mind. And I'd like to introduce Alison, who will talk to that.
Thank you, Greg. My name's Alison Gosper. My role is that of the MAT coordinator for CASA. I'll just briefly explain MAT. You can find the details listed on our website in this link, casa.gov.au MAT. It's a free, as we've mentioned, online tool to develop and manage your manuals and expositions electronically. It has a template which reflects the sample that has been published as a Word document and contains the sample text that you just copy in, add any attachments, which may be your additional manuals that you've been talking about, or org charts or images and things like that. You can insert them in. And then you submit it electronically and it's reviewed. So everybody's looking at the current version of the manual. All the details are in this, as I said. It will be available in MAT to use very shortly, and we just ask that you register with this link. Send me your details, your company name. I'll advise you when it's ready. We'll create your access, send you a link to the online training, and you can get started immediately. If you have any questions, you can email me at matt@casa.gov.au. That's the summary.
Thanks, Alison. So has anyone got any questions for Alison while she's on the line? It's a rare privilege. Great. Look, of course, if you can't think of a question now, please feel free to put it in at the end, and we'll still be online until the end. And of course, afterwards, we'll be capturing the chat.
Yeah.
There's one now.
Greg, yep, we've got a question from Chris.
Okay. Will the different wording examples, no, it's the same wording examples, but you just type your own information in as you can with the Word document, or copy and paste in as well.
Great.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes. Yes. When you submit, the email notification goes directly to regservices@casa.gov.au, automated. Yep. And you receive a confirmation email that it's been submitted, so it won't get lost. And I monitor that as well.
Okay. Any more?
No, you would email it directly to regservices@casa.gov.au.
There's one from Dan O'Dwyer that came in around the same time. Is there a plan to incorporate a 133 ops manual into MAT?
So the template that's been provided as a work document includes 133, 135 and 138. So if you're a 133 operator, you would just enter your relevant content in the sections, and those that aren't applicable, just put not applicable, as you would with the Word document. But there's lots of automation in that the draft watermark automatically comes and goes. The page numbering, the list of effective pages automatically operate functions for you. So lots of the version control automatically works for you. So those Microsoft Word difficulties that we sometimes have, well, there's none in that. It's just done automatically. But
Thanks, Alison. Fabulous. So we'll move on to the next topic. That was questions for Alison, but feel free to flick them through and she'll pick them up as she goes through.
Oh, we've got a couple of late questions, Greg. Got a few more that have come through. Can you see?
I can answer that one. 121 is not included in that at the moment. You might answer the one from Chris there about the email, the new exposition, if you could do that one, Alison.
That's if not submitting in Matt.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Look, whoever's got their hand up can answer that. I think that would be Niels, would it?
Hi, it's Niels again. Just quickly, the question for whether there is a 121 template. We have an AC published called AC1-02, developing operations manuals and expositions. That includes 2 annexes, and those annexes have a table of contents available for a 121 operator as well as a compliance matrix that helps you develop the content. Nothing stopping you from using the current sample manual suite and its content if that works for you. But CASA has only developed a sample manual suite now for 133, 135, and 138.
And to answer Dan's question about 138 format non-mustering, so that's included in the one template, 138, 135, 133.
So maybe it's worth adding, Dan, if you are, say, for example, a 133, 138 operator, you would go to that manual and you would select the sections that is applicable to yourself. Because part 133 and 135 are so similar, we have put them together. And if you open those sample manuals, it should speak for itself, especially when you use the guides to the manual that helps you explain how it all works. I might be able to answer Chris's question as well a bit further up, whether when you submit a new exposition, if it needs to be accompanied by a declaration. No, it does not. You don't need to sign another form for it.
There's one down the bottom for you as well from Scott there, Niels.
So 1 second. Yes, you do. So the reason why we put that together, and those compliance matrices, you can find them as well in AC1-02. The reason they are there is because we can't write a manual for every operator. Everybody has their differences, but what it does do, it helps you ticking off, making sure that you meet compliance. So it's a tool for you to help, and you would only use the ones that's applicable to yourself.
Okay, well, look, thanks for that. We're about halfway through, so we've got some time at the end as well to answer some more. So I'll march on, and this may prompt some more questions, which we're very happy to deal with. So keep them coming when appropriate. Now, I'm just going to be talking briefly about some understanding of the rules and what we've got out there to help you. Prior to 2nd of December, CASA produced some key operational changes documents. These were early documents which mapped a lot of the new rules against some of the old rules, or sorry, the other way around, mapped the old rules and what was replacing them or changing them. At the time, some of our other material wasn't available, and now it is, of course, and it's been out for a while. So each of the parts have an acceptable means of compliance and guidance material document. And if you want to know anything about the rule, if you've had a read of the rule and you don't quite get it, that's the first place to have a look. The acceptable means, the AMCGM is referred to as refers to each particular part, and it refers to each particular part by its individual reference. So if you want to look up what 135080 is all about, well, you go to that reference in the AMCGM. So you don't have to read it from front to back. So we're not expecting you to do that, nor is it required, but if there's a particular part you need to know something about, you'll find it there. The only disclaimer I'd make there is if we felt that the information that we needed to give you was too large to go in that document and would make it too big, we developed a separate advisory circular for it. And you can see things in there about passenger handling. There's one on fuel. There's one on ditching and things like that. So there's some advisory stuff that goes into greater detail than the AMCGM concept permits. That's just to enable that document to be the right size for everyone to use as much as possible. And you can go in through the website to find that guidance material, and it's a reasonably clear path if you've been onto the site recently of how to get to that guidance material. Our guidance material is continually being refined. Now, the regulations aren't being refined particularly. However, our way of presenting the material and getting feedback from industry, like in these sessions, has meant that we revisit our guidance material and we make it clearer where necessary. Obviously, these things have some human errors built in there where we've made some mistakes somewhere. We fix them up if we've made the mistake. But basically, the target is to get material that's guidance that is easy to understand and reasonably easy to apply. We're not trying to make it more difficult. We're trying to make it less difficult. So if we get someone telling us that it's no good, well, we'll get in there and fix it for you. Now, if you've used an earlier version of guidance material, it's not invalid when a later version is published. It's probably just better. So if you acted on what we said earlier, there's no reason you should go and revisit and change all that because it isn't different. However, you know, it might pay to have a look at what both versions say. They normally won't say anything except probably improve the picture. Now, one thing that I need to stress, and this is about everything you do in our interactions with CASA and regulations and guidance, you need to check the website to make sure you're using the latest version. Now, that's not just the guidance material, of course. Those of you who reference legislation, one of the traps is saving that piece of legislation to your desktop or to a remote device or whatever, and using that as a reference. And in the background, we may have changed something. We may have changed an exemption. We may have issued a new exemption. And we may have updated, as we said, our guidance material. You need to make sure you're working on the latest one. We don't want you wasting time on using things that aren't valid anymore. So I urge you to go back and check the website and the Federal Register of Legislation, if it's legislation you're looking for, to make sure you've got the latest version. One way of helping you with that is our mailing list. We determine off that list, we just fire the stuff at you automatically. So if you ask to be updated, you will get the latest material as we publish it. So you don't have to keep going back into the website to see whether there's something new. So I urge you to subscribe to those lists in the area that you need to know about. Of course, you'll get a mountain of material, but you can always delete the stuff that doesn't apply to you. So that's one way of keeping up with how we're going with this guidance material. That's all I've got for this little section. So have you got any questions on what I've mentioned there about our guidance material generally and how it interfaces with our objectives? Key operational differences documents, what changes are in V2.1? I can't recall. However, they've all been superseded now by the fact that we've got new AMCGM. I would have to go and look at that, but if you let me know what subject area you're particularly keen on, I can maybe able to recall, but I would just need to go myself and have a look at them because that was a while ago for me. Sorry, Andrew, but that's the best I can do at the moment. Anyone else for anything on our guidance material? Okay, well, moving on. Now we've got the next topic is airworthiness and maintenance. I'll now introduce Ifti, who will take the floor and talk to you about a couple of little items on that list. And I'll back out. I think you're muted, Ifti.
Okay, how is that?
Got it.
Okay, good afternoon all. I'm Ifti Ahmed, Senior Standard Officer from Airworthiness and Engineering branch of CASA. To begin with, let me clarify that there are two regulatory schemes dealing with the airworthiness and maintenance of aircraft. One under Part 4A and 4B of CAR 1988, and the other one is under Part 42 and 145 of CASAR 1998. So these are the two different set of regulation, and depending, what kind of operation you are in, I will explain that now. Whether it will depend on whether CAR or CASAR would apply to your aircraft. One of the key aspects of airworthiness and maintenance requirements are airworthiness management obligation of the operator. We commonly call it maintenance control function. This obligation includes ensuring maintenance is provided by appropriately approved maintenance organizations. So if you are under the CAR regulation, that is CAR 98 regulation, then CAR 30 maintenance organization is the organization that would provide maintenance for your aircraft. And if CASAR 1998 applies to your aircraft in relation to maintenance and continuing airworthiness, then Part 145 maintenance organization would provide maintenance to your aircraft. How CAR and CASAR applies in relation to maintenance and continuing airworthiness for different classes of aircraft. Back in 2011, new airworthiness and maintenance regulation was introduced under Civil Aviation Regulation 1998. Under the change, what used to be regular public transport, or RPT, transitioned into Part 42 of CASARs. This means 145 maintenance became mandatory for all those aircraft that used to be RPT. For all other aircraft operation, including charter and aerial work, CAR 1988 requirement remained the default regulation. With the application of new flight operation regulation last year, the aim was to maintain status quo for airworthiness and maintenance requirement. Under the new flight operation regulation, the RPT and charter has been replaced by new terminology, which is schedule versus non-scheduled air transport operation. So what used to be RPT is pretty much scheduled air transport operation, and what used to be charter is now non-scheduled air transport operation. This means Part 42 maintenance control requirement and Part 145 maintenance applies to all scheduled air transport operation under Parts 135 or 121. There is no scheduled aircraft operation under 133, I understand. CAR 1988 maintenance control requirement and CAR 30 maintenance applies to all non-scheduled air transport operation under Part 133, 135, and 121 air transport operation, and all aerial work operation. In relation to maintenance control, there has been some changes to the role of Head of Airworthiness and Maintenance Control, or HAMC as we call it. Since aerial work operation under 138 is no longer attract an AOC, there seems to be doubt if an HAMC is needed in aerial work operation under 138. Now, there is no direct requirement now for HAMC for Part 138 operation because it doesn't attract an AOC, but Part 138 regulation requires operators manual to include a description of arrangement for managing the continuing airworthiness of the aircraft. So the overall function of managing airworthiness and responsibility for establishing airworthiness arrangement remains with the 138 operator. We would expect an individual to be identified with the role of overseeing this function. That regulation is Regulation 138-155 regarding the content of the operations manual. So that's pretty much, the changes in relation to airworthiness management and maintenance obligation, which is not much of a change really. The significant change in relation to airworthiness area is about approval of minimum equipment list, or MEL as we call it. Now, I don't know to what extent this audience is involved with the MEL or the use of it. In the past, Regulation 37 of the CAR was used to approve MEL and changes to MEL. Regulation 37 of CAR, or CAR 37 as we call it, is no longer applicable for approval of MEL, and this power has been, I guess, allocated in subpart 91Y of CASAR. Why in 91Y? Because MEL is considered a flight operation document, and 91Y is then a common vehicle for approval of MEL and changes to MEL. And the relevant MOS, that is 91 MOS, provides the standard for, or the specification for the MEL itself. The delegation for approval of MEL, as it existed under CAR 37, has now been reissued under the new head of power in subpart 91Y of CASAR. Those delegates that used to hold delegation under 37 are still available for approval of MEL and changes to MEL under 91Y. So that's the significant change in airworthiness and operational regulation dealing with MEL. There may be a need to align your manual if your manual does deal with MEL and approval of MEL. If not, then I guess you are not affected. So that's in summary, or in short, what has changed or what has not changed in respect to maintenance and airworthiness. Happy to take any question.
Thanks, Ifty. Well, another minute or so for someone, or a few seconds for someone to type a question in. If there's nothing coming through, which I can't see at the moment, though I am a long way from you in Darwin, from most of you. Nothing? All right. Okay. Well, then, look, we'll move on, and I'd like to invite Peter Marsh to take the floor for what happens next.
Sorry,
Thanks, Greg.
sorry, Peter.
We've got Niels on board, so Niels is going to take this section.
Excellent.
Can I just ask, before we do that, we do have a question in relation to maintenance. So Andrew Edwards has asked, just to clarify, for non-scheduled part 121 and 135 ops, no compulsory move to part 42-145.
Yes, so the concept of status quo minimum disruption means even if you're a 121 operator doing non-scheduled air transport, you remain with the CAR maintenance requirement, maintenance and airworthiness requirement. So no change there until such time an operator decides to move into scheduled air transport operation, then the 42 will become applicable. So the application regulation for 42 has been amended to reflect that. Any new operator moving into, or any operator moving into, existing operator moving into scheduled air transport will have to, I guess, have a CAMO, a continuing airworthiness management organization approval, and have to source maintenance from part 145 maintenance organizations.
Greg, if I can just jump in there and just extend what Ifti's saying with respect to scheduled air transport and non-scheduled air transport, that operators should have a look at the dictionary definitions of those things, because they include the concepts of accommodation on the aircraft being available for use by persons generally. That needs to be remembered within the context of scheduled and non-scheduled operations.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks, Ifti. We've got another question. Chris is asking, is an MEL developed and approved mandatory for all Part 135 aircraft operated by an operator?
As far as I know, it's probably not mandatory for all. As somebody from the flight ops area would be able to clarify that a bit more, I think. Dale, maybe you are aware of this.
Yeah, the original context for the policy for MELs was it was going to be mandatory for all IFR operations and for operations that were international. Essentially, the current exemption changes that mandate. I'll just go duck in and have a quick check of the wording of the exemption so I don't miss talk here. But it wasn't going to be compulsory for VFR operations. So give me a couple of seconds and I'll get back to you.
We
Thanks,
might grab
Dale.
that answer at the end of Dale, if that's okay with you, Chris. So we'll let Niels keep going with where he has started with. Yeah, if you don't want to, if you don't mind, Niels.
Hi again. If we can please populate this slide, thank you. Look, we're here to support and work with everyone to make sure everybody is able to comply with the new rules. And if we find any gaps or any issues, challenges, we're here to help. But ultimately, the responsibility for compliance sits with an operator, and the requirement for that compliance hasn't changed between 2 December and 2nd of June. So that is still the same. But what we really want to do is we allowed operators to provide an interim manual in December that was sort of a quick fix, if you will, to make sure we could progress and the work wasn't too onerous. But we now like to see a manual that is more usable for your crew and for your staff to be used. So we, for example, you might have had annexes in the back of your manual in the past. Now we want to have that integrated inside of that manual. So a proper workable document like we had in the past. We won't be assessing the content of your manual on submission, but again, responsibility lies with the operator, and we continue to do work like we normally do. For example, you submit a request for a significant change. We assess those areas. Surveillance activities will be ongoing, all those sort of things, and that gives industry opportunities as well to liaise with CASA if there are any issues. If you're not sure about being compliant or not, a good tool would be the compliance matrices. They sit in the back of the sample manuals, but also as an annex to AC1-02. And really, we're all trying to do the right thing. So if that's the case, there's no point for CASA to come down hard on industry for any reason if we just try to make it work, right? So we find an issue anywhere. If that is the case, let's work together and make sure we can help you make your manual more compliant. Any questions?
Okay, anything for Niels going forward? Because we're almost at the end. So I suppose apart from those issues with MEL, which we'll get to as soon as possible, we're 10 minutes early. So if you've got anything you want to fire at the panel that's you think we might be able to answer on the spot, let's have it while you've got us all together.
Thanks, Greg. I'm not sure if our maintenance people have seen, we've got 3 unanswered questions there. There's the question about MEL, whether it's mandatory for all Part 135s, which Dale said he was going to look into. We've got one about applicability for a Part 133 operator. and another one about applicability to Part 138 IFR Airwork Passenger Ops. Not sure if anyone's able to answer those right now, but if you wouldn't mind, Ifti, I can see you've got your camera on there. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out that particular question in the text. And when we say application, is it application of MEL or application of new regulation? So I think it's about application of MEL. So it's not any different, I guess, than what Dale was going to find out. As far as I know, it's certainly not mandatory for all 133 and 135 operator to have an MEL. But I would wait for Dale to verify. I was expecting him to do that. So can you read the actual question, Mel?
Yeah, yeah, sure, Ifti. So I'll go through all of them. So first of all, Chris asked, is an MEL developed and approved mandatory for all Part 135 aircraft operated by an operator? I think that's the one Dale's
That's the
looking
original
at.
question Dale was looking
Yeah.
at. Yep.
Then we've
Yeah, I've
got
got the answer to that one for you.
Yeah, Dale, can
oh,
you?
brilliant.
Yeah, basically, as I said, the original policy for 133 and 135 was for IFR operations. Yes, it would be mandatory, but and for international operations, and of course for VFR, it wouldn't necessarily be mandatory. It was an election if you wanted to have it or not. The exemption instrument that's in place for both 133 and 135 effectively has the same conditions, and it says that if you were previously an AOC holder or an early applicant for an AOC or an AOC variation that previously authorised charter or aerial work air ambulance operations in a rotorcraft/aeroplane, and it did not authorise RPT operations in the rotorcraft/aeroplane, you're exempted from compliance with 133035, which is respect to the MEL requirement. And it's subject to the condition that the operator must not commence using the rotorcraft for scheduled air transport operations, and that ceases to have effect the exemption the day that the operator commences using the relevant aircraft on scheduled air transport operations. So if you commence scheduled air transport operations, remembering that's like the old RPT because it's applicable to the carriage of persons generally on scheduled operations, and it also the exemption discontinues the day and approval of an MEL for the aircraft under Regulation 91.935 takes effect. So in other words, if you elect to have an MEL for the aircraft, regardless of scheduled or non-scheduled operations, the exemption goes away. And finally, it ceases at the end of the 3rd of December 2023, and that's when 133035 and the applicable provision in 135 will come into effect from full time. That will be for all IFR operations or international operations.
Thanks, Dale. And can you tell us what's the exemption number for the MEL that you're referring to there?
This is section 6 in CASA 8421 for 133. I haven't got the 135 open, but I can grab it for you by the end of the discussion if you like.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just chucking it in the chat as well, that will be helpful.
Yeah, and for 138, 138 doesn't have anything specific for MELs with respect to the carriage of aerial work passengers. It effectively defers to 91, but I'll just go in and double check my recollections on that as well, because I've been dealing with a bunch of different topics for the last 3 days. So I'll just go in and make sure that that's absolutely correct before the end of the discussion as well.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mel?
I think we've covered off most of the
Yep.
MEL stuff, and we've got some other questions rolling in. So I think we've covered off applicability for Part 133 and 138. Is that correct? So we can probably move on from those.
Yep.
So Andrew Edwards is asking, this isn't maintenance related. Is there a Part 121 compliance matrix yet? It was under development in AC 1-02. Niels, you might, or Greg, you might know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I just answered it in the chat. Apologies. I thought that was
Okay.
published. I'll work on that to get it out as soon as possible. Sorry, Andrew.
Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see you have answered that. It just didn't show what that was in relation to. All right, so that's in relation to that one. Scott's asked for the MEL exemption number, which we'll pop in later. Marty's asking, can you please tell me if a two-pilot operation Part 135 needs a safety manager and check-in training in the future, do we use the exemption number as per the guide in our exposition?
I'll talk to that if you like. Thanks, Marty, for your question. It doesn't matter how many pilots you've got in the 135. The safety manager and training and checking can be exempted if you choose to do so, and you can operate under that exemption. When you see the samples, you'll notice, if you go and have a look in there under those topics, you'll see that there's some text about what exact section of the exemption you could apply to not have to address that matter in your sample. In between now and when these exemptions run out, as we've said before, we'll be giving you some guidance on what you could do to comply there. If you've put that thumbs up, I presume that's sort of answered that question.
Yes, and just further to the Part 135 exemption for MELs, it's in CASA EX 85-21. And it's again at section 6, the same section as 84-21 for 133. And if you review the Part 138 MOS, you'll notice a reference to minimum equipment lists in there, but the reference as Part 138 actually defers to 91 effectively for equipment, except for some specialised requirements that are additional equipment requirements for certain operations. Its reference to MELs basically takes you back to Part 91, and it also refers to operating with unserviceable equipment, that it can only be done in accordance with the requirements of, in other words, the equipment should be serviceable, or it can only be done in accordance with the requirements of your MEL if you have one. So you can do a quick search in the 138 MOS on that on minimum equipment, and it brings you to all of those references. There's only about 6 that you need to look at. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Dale. Now, you might know the answer to this one. Are we going to have a cap or any other advisory stuff on approval of MELs? Because they kind of relate to various, you know, the CARs, the CASARs, and our civil aviation orders. So, or IFTI,
Yes,
are you able to
because
answer that one?
we had a lot of discussion with the delegates who would use this document, and currently there is a cap to deal with the same issue. So we told them that actual assessment of of an MEL against the standard set out in the 91 MOS doesn't change. So we told them to continue to apply those standards or the procedure and specification in the MOS as the primary reference, and that aligns pretty much with the technical requirement in the cap. When we have time, and I've had discussion with flight standards colleagues in CASA, and we will obviously update that cap and turn that into an AC for 91 when the time and opportunity allows us to do that. If that's how we certainly want to do that, but there is nothing in the existing cap that kind of technical requirements are very similar, and absolutely doesn't change in terms of assessing an MEL against the standard set out in the MOS.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers the question then, Adam. Just looking through the list here, we've still got some more around this topic, and Marty might need some following up offline if still feeling a bit confused there. So we'll work out how we can do that, noting that
Yeah,
we're
Melissa.
nearly out of time.
Yeah, Melissa, if you could just capture Marty's email and details, and I will get back to her.
Him or her.
Him or her, sorry. Sorry.
I'm not sure.
Sorry, non-gender. Sorry about that. But I'll get back to Marty and talk about those exemptions.
Okie dokie. Alrighty, so we might just see if we can pick off a few. I mean, I'm happy to. Is everyone happy? We're right on 2 o'clock, but we might be able to get through the remaining questions if people are prepared to go over a bit.
I can hang around.
Yeah, so just looking through the list. So Sam has a question here. Is there a process to follow for an exemption to a rule? Specifically, the new rule preventing operators from hot refueling turbine helicopters under Part 133 without a pressure fueling system. Does anyone know the answer to that one?
Look, I can talk just generally about that. We don't have a standard request for exemption document to my knowledge because of the wide variety of what these exemptions might be. However, in Part 11 of CASA, there is a section which talks about how CASA, what CASA needs to assess an exemption. And there's a little bit of a checklist of things that we expect an exemption request to cover. I can't recall the exact regulation. I'm looking it up as we speak, but it's in Part 11, and it talks about what you need to have if we're going to consider it. I'll get you the reference shortly, Sam.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Greg. Quite a few questions coming in here. We've got one here in relation to the Part 135 MOS. Matthew's asking, it suggests a failure of any nav equipment. Aircraft must be able to continue operational flight plan and any ATC instructions. This seems that practically any IFR aircraft would need 2 TSO 146 units. Can you shed any light on this, please? Who might be able to help with that one? Part 135 MOS interpretation there.
I think we need to take that one offline so that we can
Yeah,
get a
I'll take-
full,
I'll take
full
that one
appreciation
offline.
of what the situation may be,
Yeah,
and
okay.
possibly even an operational example of the circumstances.
Again, if we could get your details, Matthew, so we can get back to you about that.
Excellent. I'm just putting our email address here for the ones where we haven't been able to answer. So that one we'll have to take offline. Ross is asking, is it possible to obtain a more definitive timeline for when the MAT facility for 133, 135, 138 may be available? End of this week, next week? I know, Alison, you've said it's kind of like top of the priority list. Can you be more specific than that, or is it a bit difficult?
It's a bit difficult now. Sorry, it's just the highest priority. As soon as it can possibly be published, it will be, and
Okay.
everybody will be notified. And thanks everybody for their registering. I'm getting a few.
Excellent. We've got a question here from Andrew about flight distance limitations. The reference here is 135.035. King Air 200, Conquest, etc. has slipped through the cracks. What would be the flight distance limitation for a B200? Is anyone able to answer that one today?
Look, I suggest we take it offline because I know there's some borderline requirements there with respect to the old policy in regard to maximum takeoff weight, line in the sand scenarios. That question would get a general answer back without any trouble. I think we've actually already considered that in the GDC. I just want to make sure I go back and check through the Flight Ops Regs Task Force replies to make sure I give the same answer again. That's the main thing.
Brilliant. Okie dokie. So that's that one there.
So Sam, I can see that the 11.160 is the regulation. It's down further in the chat if you're scrolling through there regarding exemptions. I'm
just giving everyone the thumbs up when I think we've covered their one off. Someone's asking, are the extensions of 3 years for SMS and 15 months for checking and training from the 2nd of June? Niels, I think you've answered that with a timeline there. So we've actually got those implementation dates there for you. Training and checking 2 March 2023.
Yes.
NTS stuff.
Yes, those are the dates for implementation. But what I said earlier, we will provide you with significant comms prior to the implementation and particularly the submission dates for everyone, so everybody's clear on what they need to do. The earliest one coming around is training and checking systems, where the submission date is due on 2 September 2022.
Yep. Thanks, Niels. All right, I think we'll be able to wrap up soon. Just a couple of last ones. Andrew Edwards, in a previous session, you've asked about the performance requirements for Part 135 and what was stated in the AMCGM. There was a significant deviation from 135.f and the AMCGM. Has there been any progress on that?
I can answer that. Well, there's a bunch of amendments due out in the 135 AMCGM, which we'll get to when we finish this stuff. So it's in train.
It's in train. It's just not out yet.
Yep.
Lovely. And just finally, this is probably a good one to wrap up with. Erin's asking if we have more questions and want to talk to someone, is the main CASA phone number the one to use, or is there a dedicated phone number? We only have the one phone number, but who's best to answer the question around this one?
This is Niels. I'll talk to this. Acknowledging that it's probably far from ideal, but CASA has a guidance center that intends to answer all the questions. So if there are any issues, call that phone number, ask for the guidance center, or put a request in through the guidance center, and then it will go to the appropriate area in CASA.
Excellent. And if you think of something overnight, come to tomorrow's session.
Thanks, Melissa.
There's always that option.
Look, we really appreciate your questions. Thanks very much, everyone.